When my son rented out our family home on Christmas Eve for his own financial gain, I was devastated. But as a retired engineer, I refused to let greed ruin the holidays. With the help of an unexpected visitor, I hatched a plan to take back what was rightfully ours and teach my son the true meaning of Christmas. The events that unfolded that night were nothing short of a holiday miracle. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The twinkling lights on the Christmas tree cast a warm glow throughout the living room, but the atmosphere in the house was anything but festive. I sat in my armchair, staring at the cold fireplace, my heart heavy with the weight of my son's betrayal. It had all started a week ago when my son, David, had called me with a proposition. "Dad," he had said, his voice dripping with false cheer, "I've got a great idea. Why don't we rent out the house for the holidays? We could make a fortune." I had been stunned into silence. The house had been in our family for generations, a place where we had celebrated countless Christmases, birthdays, and milestones. It was more than just a building. It was a home, filled with memories and love. But David had insisted, his tone growing more aggressive with each passing moment. "Think about it, Dad. You're not getting any younger, and the house is just sitting there, gathering dust. We could use the money to pay off some debts, maybe take a nice vacation." I had tried to protest, to explain to him the importance of family and tradition, but he had brushed off my concerns with a dismissive wave of his hand. "You're being sentimental, Dad. It's time to start thinking about the future." And so, against my better judgment, I had agreed. I had signed the papers, handed over the keys, and watched as strangers invaded my home, turning it into a soulless rental property. Now, on Christmas Eve, I sat alone in the house, listening to the sounds of laughter and music coming from the other rooms. The renters were having a grand time, oblivious to the pain and heartache that their presence had caused. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the noise, but it was no use. The memories came flooding back, the smell of gingerbread baking in the oven, the sound of carols being sung around the piano, the sight of my beloved wife, Mary, hanging ornaments on the tree. Mary had passed away 5 years ago, but her presence still lingered in every corner of the house. She had been the heart and soul of our family, the one who had kept us all together through the ups and downs of life. I couldn't help but wonder what she would think of David's actions, of the way he had so callously disregarded the values and traditions that she had held so dear. I knew that she would be heartbroken, just as I was. As I sat there, lost in thought, I heard a knock at the door. I frowned, wondering who could be calling at this late hour. The renters had all arrived hours ago, and I wasn't expecting any visitors. I heaved myself out of the chair, my joints creaking with age, and made my way to the front door. When I opened it, I was greeted by a sight that took my breath away. There, standing on the porch, was a man who looked exactly like my late father. He had the same twinkling blue eyes, the same crooked smile, the same air of mischief and warmth. "Hello, son," he said, his voice soft and gentle. "I think it's time we had a little talk." I stared at him, my mouth agape, unable to believe what I was seeing. My father had died when I was just a boy, and yet here he was, standing before me on Christmas Eve, looking just as he had in my childhood memories. "Dad," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. "Is it really you?" He chuckled, a sound that filled me with warmth and comfort. "In a way, son, I'm here to help you remember what's truly important in life." And with that, he stepped inside the house, closing the door behind him and looking around with a critical eye. "Now, let's see what we can do about this little situation, shall we?" I followed my father into the living room, still struggling to comprehend what was happening. How could he be here, after all these years? And why had he chosen this moment, of all times, to appear? He settled himself into my armchair, looking for all the world like he belonged there. "Now, son," he said, fixing me with a serious gaze, "tell me about this business with the renters." I sighed, sinking down onto the couch opposite him. "It's David," I said, my voice heavy with sadness and disappointment. "He convinced me to rent out the house for the holidays, said we could make a lot of money." My father nodded, his expression thoughtful. And what do you think about that? I hesitated, trying to find the right words. I don't like it, I admitted. This house, it's more than just a place to live. It's a part of our family, a part of our history. Renting it out like this, it feels wrong. He leaned forward, his eyes twinkling with understanding. You're right, son. This house is a home, not a commodity. It's a place where love and memories are made, where families come together to celebrate and support one another. I felt a lump form in my throat, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I miss Mary, I whispered. She would have never let this happen. My father reached out and patted my hand, his touch warm and comforting. Mary was a special woman, he said softly. She understood the true meaning of family, of tradition, and she would want you to fight for those things, even when it's hard. I nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle over me. You're right, Dad. I can't let David do this. I have to stand up for what's right, for what Mary would have wanted. He smiled, a proud gleam in his eye. That's my boy. Now, let's figure out a plan. For the next hour, we sat together in the living room, talking and strategizing. My father had always been a brilliant problem solver, and he approached this situation with the same keen intellect and creativity that had made him such a successful engineer. By the time we were finished, I had a clear course of action. I would confront David, tell him that the rental agreement was off, and that the house was to remain in our family. I would remind him of the values and traditions that Mary had held so dear, and I would appeal to his sense of honor and decency. If that didn't work, I would take legal action. I had the deed to the house, after all, and I could prove that David had coerced me into signing the rental agreement. It would be a difficult and painful process, but I was willing to do whatever it took to protect my family's legacy. As the clock struck midnight, signaling the start of Christmas Day, my father stood up and stretched. Well, son, I think it's time for me to be going. I felt a pang of sadness at his words, a desperate longing to keep him with me just a little while longer. Do you have to go? I asked, my voice small and pleading. He smiled, a gentle, understanding smile. I'm afraid so, son. But remember, I'm always with you, in here. He tapped his chest, right over his heart. I nodded, blinking back tears. I know, Dad. And thank you. For everything. He pulled me into a hug, his embrace strong and warm. I'm proud of you, son. Never forget that. And then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, he was gone. The living room was empty once more, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. But I didn't feel alone. I felt stronger, more determined than ever before. I had a plan, a purpose, and the love and support of my family, both living and dead. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that I would face challenges and obstacles at every turn, but I also knew that I had the strength and the courage to face them head-on, to fight for what was right and true. And so, with a deep breath and a sense of calm resolve, I made my way upstairs to bed, ready to face the dawn of a new day and the battles that lay ahead. For I was a father, a husband, and a man of principle, and I would not let my family down. Not now. Not ever. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose and determination that I hadn't felt in years. The events of the previous night had given me a new perspective, a new lease on life, and I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I made my way downstairs, half expecting to see my father sitting in the armchair, a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face. But the living room was empty, the only sign of his presence a faint scent of peppermint and tobacco that lingered in the air. I smiled to myself, remembering his words of wisdom and encouragement. He had always been my guiding light, my compass in a world that could be confusing and overwhelming at times. And even though he was gone, I knew that he would always be with me, in spirit, if not in body. I made myself a cup of coffee and settled down at the kitchen table, my mind already racing with plans and possibilities. I had to find a way to get the renters out of the house, to reclaim what was rightfully mine and my family's. I picked up the phone and dialed David's number, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy and irritated. "Dad, what's going on? It's early." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation to come. "David, we need to talk. About the house, and about what you've done." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then David spoke again, his tone defensive and angry. "What do you mean, what I've done? I'm just trying to make some extra money to help the family out." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "No, David. You're not helping the family. You're hurting us, hurting me. This house is more than just a place to live. It's a part of our history, our legacy. And you've treated it like it's nothing more than a way to make a quick buck." I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line, his anger and frustration palpable. "Dad, you're being ridiculous. It's just a house. And besides, you agreed to this. You signed the papers." I closed my eyes, remembering the way he had pressured me, the way he had used my love for him as a weapon against me. "I know I did, David, and that was a mistake. But it's a mistake that I'm going to fix, starting right now." "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice rising with alarm. "I mean that the rental agreement is off. I want the renters out of the house today. And I want you to promise me that you'll never try something like this again." There was a long, tense silence on the other end of the line. I could hear David breathing heavily, his mind no doubt racing with arguments and counter-arguments. But in the end, he simply sighed, his voice heavy with resignation. "Fine, Dad. I'll take care of it. But don't expect me to be happy about it." I felt a sense of relief wash over me, a weight lifting from my shoulders. "Thank you, David. I know this isn't easy, but it's the right thing to do. For all of us." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of accomplishment and pride. I had stood up for what I believed in, for what was right and true. And I had done it without compromising my values or my integrity. I spent the rest of the day making preparations, calling the renters and explaining the situation, arranging for their early departure and refunding their money. It was a hassle, but it was worth it to know that my home would be mine once again. As the last of the renters left, carrying their bags and chatting amongst themselves, I stood in the doorway, watching them go. I felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over me, a feeling of rightness and belonging. And then, just as I was about to turn and go back inside, I saw a figure walking up the path, a figure that I recognized immediately. It was David. His head hung low and his shoulders slumped. He looked up at me as he approached, his eyes filled with shame and regret. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did, for how I treated you and the family." I felt my heart swell with love and forgiveness, with the kind of unconditional acceptance that only a parent can feel. I stepped forward and pulled him into a hug, holding him close and letting him know that all was forgiven. "It's okay, son," I said softly. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them, and that we try to do better in the future." He nodded, his face buried in my shoulder. "I will, Dad. I promise. I'll make you proud." And as we stood there, father and son, united in love and understanding, I knew that everything was going to be all right, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a family. For that was the true meaning of Christmas, the true gift that we had been given. Not money or possessions, but the love and support of those who mattered most. And that was a gift that I would cherish forever. A gift that would sustain me through all the ups and downs of life. For I was a father, a husband, and a man of principle. And I had everything I needed, right here in my arms. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.